Welcome back to The Full View. In the final days towards the election, which is 4 days away, the ANC has hosted their final Siyanqoba rally at the FNB Stadium in Soweto today. Samkele Maseko, who was there, joins us to talk more about that. Full to capacity, what was the key message that the president delivered there? He said it would focus forward-looking on what the program of government of the 7th administration will be. Was that the message, and did it land?
Essentially, the president of the ANC was rehashing the party's manifesto, rereading it to those who may have not been here, listening to him and hearing him during the election campaign, looking at the 6 priority points of the governing party, particularly sticking on the issue of priority number 2, which is job creation in their manifesto, and particularly knowing that South African economy has not been performing well. He said that they would seek to create jobs in order to get South Africans the much needed skills that are needed by the South African economy. Because essentially what you've got to understand, Oliver, is that South Africans no longer care about handouts, no longer care about T-shirts. South Africans want to get to the crux of the business of the day, which is getting jobs and having a sustainable life for themselves, as opposed to continuously being dependent on government. So essentially, that particular speech today by the president of the ANC was around the economy of the country, the trajectory that the governing party has played throughout the course of the past 30 years, but also looking forth to the 7th administration, because they are pretty confident that they are taking the polls come the 29th of May, next week, Wednesday.
I want us to speak about the potential of that actually happening and what the coalition permutations may look like. But before we get there, I want to read this part from the president's speech there. We will prioritize food security, including VAT exemption on essential items, support community and home gardens, and take action against price fixing. I don't know what of this sounds new to you, but if any at all, what does that look like according to this manifesto?
Essentially, there's nothing new in the ANC manifesto. Let's just be point blank. There's nothing new in the manifestos of all political formations in the country. They've been rehashing South Africa's problems for the past 30 years, which centralize around job creation, centralize around the poor stability and poor performance of the South African economy, and poor performance of the power utility, Eskom, and poor service delivery in the various 9 provinces of the country. And I say that clearly noting the problems of service delivery when you go to areas such as Khayelitsha, to Gugulethu, to Emzamoye, to going to Emlazi, going to Mbali, going to Esobantu, and going to Sishiro in Limpopo, going to Gqeberha in those particular areas of Zwide, and going to other areas and townships and rural areas within this country where service delivery is on the doldrums from all political formations within the country that are in charge, respectively from a local government level, going to the provincial level, and ultimately to national level. And also looking at the deficiencies that are there when you go to rural Zululand and Mkhanyakude areas, where in some of those districts there is no water running to the people. So the issue of these particular promises that are made by politicians, that particular extract that I've just read by the president of the ANC, it speaks to how politicians are in electioneering mood and speaking what South Africans want to hear.
I want to read you this, these 3 things, because they stand out for good reasons. The president says we will complete the excellent work that is already done to tackle the electricity crisis. We have seen how Eskom's power stations are being better maintained and breaking down less often. And we have opened the doors to much more investment in electricity generation, especially in solar and wind power. Last week, you would recall the president had signed the energy, or at least the National Council of Province put before the president, the energy regulator bill. The president also then says the NHI will harness the strength of both the public and private health sectors to build a single quality health system for all. The NHI was signed into law by the president last week. And finally, on the matter of the NPA, the president says we will strengthen the police, the courts, and the NPA and other bodies to fight crime. Just last week, the president had signed, just this past week, my apologies, was it yesterday, the president had signed into law an act pertaining to the NPA. Was that a clear indication that this rushed legislative process over the last 2 to 3 weeks was so that he could deliver this kind of speech today?
In reality, what we must begin to retrospect and also look at is that the president, should he get a second term, he is already laying the foundation for that particular second term, particularly from a law enforcement strategy point of view, particularly when you are knowing that the new legislation that he signed of this new unit, which will effectively bring back the Scorpions and will further tighten the fight against crime and corruption within the state, institutions and malfeasance that is currently taking place there. So he is essentially laying that foundation in fighting crime, particularly also when you also look at that speech, when he speaks about the renewal project of his governing party, saying that the rotten apples that were there are no longer finding resonance within the party. Hence, they have left to form their own splinter organizations in reference to your ACT, to your MK party, or former President Jacob Zuma. But in essence, what you've got to look at when it comes to the performance of Eskom, you've had the former CEO, Andre Tereta, saying that Eskom is burning diesel in order to keep the lights on and the governing party is electioneering. But experts within the energy sector have come out to say, actually, no, the coal-generating units within Eskom are actually being serviced, they're being maintained, and they're performing.
Three units at having come back online, of course, in the last couple of months, bringing additional capacity on, and another unit coming on at Kuberg, which was off since December last year, or at least was supposed to come back in December. It didn't. Those come on. Was it enough for less diesel to be burned?
What we've seen from the minister and from the power utility itself, they are saying that they are performing very well, their units are doing well, and that's why they've been able to avert the burning of diesel. For instance, if you look at Krill Power Station in Mpumalanga, Krill Power Station never had all of its 6 generating units performing at the same time optimally. For the very first time, Krill Power Station, all 6 generating units, coal generating units, were performing this week. The minister had gone there a year ago and said Krill is the worst performing power station within the Eskom fleet. But today, Krill is one of the best performing power generating
Not to digress,
units.
and just to circle back to the to this final question on this. The ANC obviously being nervous about splinter parties in the opposition eroding its voter base. They speak about MK, and the president mentions MK not by name, but by a slew of euphemisms. And of course, he speaks to them being counter-revolutionaries. In what ways did he address that in his speech today?
He addressed it head-on, particularly when he spoke about MK being this particular formation of fake MK commanders of the ANC, and essentially saying that those whom do not find resonance within the party, whom have been perceived as corrupt and facing issues of malfeasance, corruption, they have essentially left the governing party. So he did address those particular issues of the MK party, ACT party. But what we've got to look at broadly is South African political formations across the board, especially the 4 biggest political formations in the country, the ANC, the DA, the EFF, and the IFP. They are all facing, particularly the 3, ANC, EFF, and the IFP, they are all facing a party of the MK that is going to eat into the electoral base, all of them, particularly when you look at how the EFF could not fill up Moses Mabhida Stadium in KwaZulu-Natal. You look at how the ANC is performing badly, particularly in the eThekwini region, and you go to Moses Mabhida region in the Umgungundlovu district, where the MK is said to be in abundance within those 2 biggest voting districts of KwaZulu-Natal. For instance, go to eThekwini, there are 1.9 registered million voters within that particular region. You go to Moses Umgungundlovu district, you've got about 1.3, 1.4 million registered voters within that particular area, and that is where the MK party will be eating into the ANC. But if you go up north of the province, they will be eating into the IFP and to the small marginal support that the EFF may have in rural KwaZulu-Natal.
Samkele, thank you so much. I'm going to have to keep it right there. Thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it.